It didn't come from an email or a side meeting in HR. No, it came from a microphone held in the manicured hands of our new coup, Jeffrey Lorne, as he stood at the center of our company-wide global launch meeting. 147 employees froze. Some turned their heads toward me. Others just stared down at their hands, pretending this wasn't happening in real time. Jeffrey's voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. We appreciate her many years of service, but leadership must evolve. Please return your badge. No one said a word. My badge, still clipped to my blazer, glowed red on the massive screen behind me. In one tap, he had revoked my access, deleted my credentials, and severed 19 years of history. Just like that. I didn't move at first, not out of confusion, out of restraint, because I had built everything they were launching today. The cloud-based mesh network. EtherLink was my blueprint, my architecture, my security protocol. I had spent the last 7 years developing its framework. The last 6 months stress testing every node, and the last 6 days surviving on less than 4 hours of sleep per night just to get it deployment ready. I didn't speak. I reached for my badge, but before unclipping it, I slid my thumb over the tiny obsidian black USB drive dangling from the lanyard. My fingers brushed the etched inscription, "Trust what they can't take." My daughter had given it to me on my birthday 5 years ago, back when I still believed that loyalty was a two-way street. The room remained agonizingly silent. Even the junior analyst who used to bring me chamomile tea looked away, her eyes fixed on her laptop. Jeffrey Lorne smiled wider, convinced the show was over. He didn't know that the drive in my palm still contained the final override keys, the single set of credentials they would need at the last stage of the rollout. I placed the badge gently on the conference table, nodded once to my old team, and stood. My heels clicked crisply against the polished concrete. No goodbyes, no thank yous, just silence thick enough to swallow. Outside the glass doors, the sun glinted off the plaza tiles, too bright for how numb I felt. I stood in the corridor for a moment, staring at the badge now stripped of power, its red LED, blinking with quiet finality. 19 years of sweat, code, and fire drills rendered meaningless in an instant. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just inhaled the sterile air of the 15th floor and remembered when this company was just a handful of people coding on second-hand laptops in a cramped loft. Back when minimum viable product meant please don't crash this time. Thought of every midnight I'd spent wrestling with memory leaks in client demos. Every Thanksgiving when I patched zero-day vulnerabilities instead of eating turkey at my parents' house. Every moment I'd traded family time for another round of load testing. And now, the system I built down to its digital bones was poised to become someone else's triumph. I slipped my phone from my pocket and saw the barrage of automated deactivation notices. One subject line caught my eye. Urgent, final deployment, approval required. It was from legal. I'd flagged it weeks ago. No one had responded. Inside, a terse paragraph, per section 12.7b of the Master Infrastructure Agreement. All global rollout licenses expire June 30th at 2:15 p.m. unless dual authentication is verified by original system architect and acting coup. I froze. They'd fired me at 2:02 p.m. The system required my signature by 2:15 p.m. and I was no longer officially there to give it. I looked at the obsidian drive in my palm. Trust what they can't take. They hadn't asked for it back. I tapped. The screen opened the internal documentation portal, access denied. Then the architecture logs. Denied. Every digital doorway I once held master keys to had slammed shut. No warnings. No error codes. Just the hush of digital exile. I returned to my car, hands still trembling. My hands weren't used to being empty. Were used to keyboards, network cables, command lines. I texted Amira, my closest peer in systems architecture. Hey, you around? No reply. 10 minutes later, I noticed she'd updated her profile status to open to new opportunities. Not blocked, just invisible. I thought I'd fought cybercriminals, but corporate politics hurt more. I sat in my car, the email still glowing. On the dashboard, 2:02 p.m., the clock ticked. They had 13 minutes left. The final gate loomed, but they'd thrown away the key. I inhaled deeply and twisted the drive between my fingers. 6 years ago, I'd negotiated a clause into the original EtherLink patent. Global deployment requires authentication by the originating architect, non-transferable unless explicitly revoked in writing by said architect. I'd assumed it was mere formality. Now I realized it was the recorder iron clause Jeffrey hadn't thought to override because he lacked either the foresight or the understanding to even look for it. I texted Max Garvin, the intern I'd mentored. Need a quick favor? Who's got override creds for EtherLink? 5 minutes later, check firewalls, only 2. Coup, and you. Yours still active. My heart pounded. He attached a screenshot. There it was. Override key A. Jeffrey Lohr. Coup, override key B. N. Harper system architect. No backups, no proxies, just me. I clicked back into the drive's hidden partition. The shell interface blinked. No alerts. No alarms. As far as EtherLink was concerned, I was still in charge. I could revoke Jeffrey's access, lock them out, reverse every firewall rule they would never launch without me. But I didn't. I simply let it sit. Still, I knew silence wasn't enough. If questions arose, I needed proof. I opened a fresh terminal, extracted authentication logs, timestamps verification chains everything recorded over the past week. I zipped it, encrypted it, and emailed it to myself with subject integrity audit. For legal review only. A ping from Max. Found something else. Check legal's archive. Attached. A scanned PDF, dated March 2018. Appendix C. Authentication. Ownership signed in my hand. I reread the clause. Section 12.7b. Final deployment. Protocol requires non-transferable biometric signature of originating architect who authored at least 75% of core. Deployment framework. Black ink. My name. Witness signatures. Filed. They had not removed me because they could not. I sat back, thumb on the USB's smooth surface, letting that fact settle. They would realize soon enough that their polished slide decks and buzzword-laden presentations could not mask the fact that the system would not move without my biometric key. I drafted an email to board@core.technova.com. Subject: Deployment hold immediate action required. The global launch is in a frozen state pending. Dual authentication. Do not proceed without verification of both keys. Backup systems have been secured. I paused. Would they even read it? Would it matter? I deleted the draft. They had cast me out of the conversation. I was no longer required to translate. I poured a cup of tea and watched the city skyline blur. In the rain-spattered window, at 2:10 p.m., I opened my monitoring dashboard. Hidden, secured, home-hosted, EtherLink's global sync status, awaiting key B, no errors, no crashes, just waiting. Exactly as designed. In the launch command center across town, Jeffrey Lohr stood rigid in front of a giant countdown clock. 5 minutes remaining. Behind him, team leads poured over terminal screens. A storm of panic crackled through the room. My phone buzzed. Max, recording from the conference room. Your clause is up. I pressed play. Jeffrey's own voice, smug. We've moved past the architecture. Legacy is for the weak. Only I have the keys now. The recording ended. He didn't know I still held mine. I closed the laptop. The rain tapped a steady drumbeat on the windowsill. I allowed myself a single, slow exhale. This wasn't revenge. It was protocol. It was responsibility. I stood, slipped the USB into my coat pocket, and stepped into the early evening chill of the street. Somewhere in that glossy tower, the countdown edged closer to 2:15. They would try to force the launch. They would scramble to find a work, but no script, no executive edict, no urgent conference call could circumvent the architecture's final gatekeeper. I merged into the crowd on the sidewalk. The obsidian drive still warm at my side. The system waited, and in that waiting, there was power. Silent, unyielding, undeniable. ChatGPT said. The sidewalks rippled with umbrellas as rain began to fall in earnest. I walked briskly toward the subway station, the USB drive a silent weight in my coat pocket. Each drop against the pavement felt like a ticking of that unseen clock. Inside the tower, panic was simmering. Outside, the city moved on, unaware. I descended the stairs 2 at a time, boots clicking against the metal steps. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Max. Legals looped in compliance. They know now. Silos are collapsing. I didn't respond. No need to. The system would speak louder than any email. On the train, I found a seat and let the movement lull me. The carriage was warm, fluorescent lights humming overhead. I thought of Jeffrey's smug smile, the way he'd strutted across that stage believing he had one. He never saw the mechanism beneath the shine. He'd never understood that true security isn't flashy, it's invisible until you need it. At my stop, I emerged into a narrow street lined with shuttered shops. I ducked into a small cafe that smelled of baking bread and espresso. Behind the counter, a barista nodded in recognition. I offered a tight smile and ordered a flat white. She slid it across the counter without asking questions. I sat at a corner table, laptop open. The steam curled from my cup as I checked the live feed from EtherLink's national monitoring node. The console rippled, 3 regions still pending, 1 recently toggled to error state. Then amber went to red in snow polo. The rest hovered, stalled. I sipped coffee, unfazed. My thoughts drifted to the implications. A global network frozen at the brink of launch wasn't just embarrassment for Cornova. It was a cautionary tale broadcast across every client on the books. Contracts stalled. Stock tickers reflected the delay as investors grew jittery. In minutes, this would be the headline-driving market reaction. Behind me, the cafe's bell jingled. A man in a black trench coat stepped in, eyes scanning. He spotted me, paused, then approached. I recognized him instantly. Arjun Patel, CTO of Orion Data Systems and longtime colleague. He slid into the seat opposite without waiting for an invitation. "You're the ghost in the machine," he said, quietly. "Thought you left town." "I'm still around," I replied, voice low. "You hear about the launch?" Every ping in my network lit up. He pulled out his own laptop and opened a secure channel. "I got your framework last week. Built-in holds, silent logging, autonomous compliance gates. Beautiful work." I looked at him. "Then you know why it's frozen?" He nodded, scanning his screen. "Clients are calling. Board's in crisis. Rumors they're sending a delegation to. There's no workaround." I cut in. "The final biometric gate only responds to me. Until I either supply or revoke the key, nothing moves." He drew a slow breath. "You're holding them hostage, or protecting them," I countered. "Either way, they can't ignore it." He leaned back. "What do you want?" I set my cup down. Something they overlooked in their torrent of buzzwords: accountability. If they truly want EtherLink to serve the future, it has to be under a framework that guarantees transparency. I'm prepared to authorize the launch under 3 conditions: full disclosure of the architectural lineage, proper credit to all original contributors, and a covenant that core security protocols remain under a non-transferable trust model. Arjun considered that. "That's a tall order." "Tall but necessary," I replied. "I won't let them rewrite history just for optics." I built the safeguards so they couldn't, even if they tried. He tapped a key, sending a message to his board liaison. "Give me 30 minutes. I'll see what their demands are." I nodded. The cafe was filling now, but my bubble remained calm. I finished the coffee, slid away the cup, and stood. "Text me." He stood too, and slipped out as quietly as he'd come. I exhaled, hands loose at my sides. Outside, the rain had softened. The clouds hung low, heavy with promise, but I felt strangely light. By the time I reached the elevated platform, I had a reply from Arjun. "Delegation departing now. They'll be at Cornova HQ in 45. They want to negotiate." I pocketed the phone and boarded the next train downtown. The lobby of the Cornova Tower was a maelstrom of anxious staffers and security. Cameras had been erected in the grand atrium for a hastily arranged press statement. Floodlights blazed. Crews hustled. Yet, as I passed through the glass doors, eyes fixed on their footsteps, no one seemed to recognize me at first. Badges held out. Faces turned. Then a double-take. Security guards parted politely but tensely. Upstairs, I took the service elevator. It dipped past the cut-off executive floors, then hummed to a stop on the ground-level command center normally restricted. The door slid open to a swarm of chairs and monitors, now rearranged into a semicircle facing a podium. A timer counted up in the corner of the largest display. 18 minutes past expiration. A hush fell as I entered. Eyes flicked to the screen, then to me. Among them were legal counsel, PR leads, engineers, even Jeffrey Lorne, looking disheveled, his crisp suit now creased, smile replaced by tension lines. Arjun stood at the center, microphone in hand. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We have invited Ms. N. Harper, the original architect of EtherLink, to address the current status and discuss next steps." Jeffrey's eyes narrowed. I approached, heels clicking. He tried to hide impatience, but his jaw twitched. I met his gaze briefly and turned to face the assembled group. "You have my attention," he said with forced cordiality. I inclined my head. As you know, the global rollout has been in hold state for 19 minutes and 42 seconds pending final authentication by both coup and original architect, per section 12.7b. That clause remains in effect. Murmurs rippled. The General Counsel stepped forward, tablet raised. We recognize the clause, but under today's corporate reorganization, Ms. Harper's role was terminated, which we believed revoked her authority. I shook my head. Authority isn't revoked by a dismissal, it's expressly non-transferable. Any alteration to that clause requires written revocation by me. No such document exists. Therefore, under the legally binding terms you negotiated, the system will not and cannot proceed. Silence. Then Jeffrey exhaled sharply. Legal, confirm there's no override. She scrolled, face pale. No, it's embedded in both the patent and our original licensing. We can't override without Ms. Harper's signed waiver. I folded my arms. Then we have two paths. 1. You wait indefinitely, during which your clients will pull back. Contracts will lapse. Reputational damage will accumulate. 2. You negotiate terms that respect the security and integrity this system was designed to uphold. PR lead spoke, voice shaky. They're calling this sabotage. I looked at her. This is protocol, not sabotage. You built it to protect your data and your users. I'm merely exercising the guardrails you agreed to. Engineers exchanged glances. Some nodded, subtly, relief flickering on their faces. Arjun raised a hand. They're right. You can't circumvent the code without violating the license. You'll lose more than time if you try. Jeffrey pinned his gaze on me, fury mingled with desperation. What do you want, Harper? Name your price. I exhaled slowly. I'm not here for payment. I'm here for principle. I want the board to acknowledge the full list of contributors in your public statement, to reinstate a transparent governance structure for EtherLink, and to reinstate my authoring rights for all future security parameters. Once that's agreed in signed minutes, I'll provide the final signature. He bristled. You expect us to issue a corporate admission in the middle of a crisis? Yes, I said. Because without transparency, you won't have trust. And without trust, security is meaningless. Throughout the room, eyes settled on him. Board representatives fidgeted. Under the glaring lights, Jeffrey's posture stiffened. He looked to legal counsel, who exchanged a long glance with the head of operations. Finally, he dipped his chin. Fine, he growled. We'll draft an amendment. Credit where it's due. Governance committee reinstated? Minutes signed within the hour? I nodded. Good, I'll await the document. I stepped back. Arjun exhaled and gave me a slight bow. I turned and left, heels echoing once more down the hallway. Back in the cafe where we'd met, I refilled my tea. My phone buzzed, document en route. I allowed myself a sip, warmth spreading through my chest. 4 pages arrived, concise bullet points, legalese, confirming the board's commitments. I read, initials scribbled at the bottom of each clause. Satisfied, I entered my biometric key into the secure channel on my laptop back at home. The monitor glowed authorization key, be verified. Global deployment resumed. Green bars rippled across the screen. Nodes reconnected, one by one. Checks turned to confirmation. And finally, the status. Phase 3 sync. Complete. Launch. Successful. I closed the laptop and leaned back, exhaling. Outside, rain had ceased. A sliver of pale sky peeked through the clouds. The city resumed its rhythm. My phone buzzed. From Arjun. Well played. I smiled and tapped back. Thank you. I rose, gathered my things, and stepped into the evening air. The weight in my pocket was gaunt, the USB long since emptied of its secret override. I walked toward the neon glow of the city skyline and thought of every line of code, every late-night dive into a terminal. Those moments had shaped a quiet power that no title could erase. And now the system, and the people who depended on it, were stronger for it. Impossible was simply code that hadn't yet been written. I knew the future would demand more than buzzwords. It would demand integ. ChatGPT said. I walked through the streets as the city exhaled around me. Storefront lights flickered on one by one, occasional cars whisking past in muted splashes of headlights. My coat hung loose. The evening air was cool, but I felt warm. The framework I'd built was alive again, but now under new stewardship. Not mine, not Jeffrey's alone, but governed by a covenant that couldn't be unmade with a single tap. Earlier, in that command center, I'd sensed a shift in the energy, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Engineers had stopped spinning in their chairs, following the glow of recommissions. Legal counsel exhaled, shoulders loosening as if shedding a burden. Even Jeffrey's expression had cracked, just enough to glimpse the weight of a lesson learned. Too late. And when the green lights had washed over the global map, it hadn't felt like victory so much as vindication for design. I passed a newsstand where headlines still screamed about the aborted launch. Cornova's confidence crashes. Tech giant on pause. Architects ghost stops rollout. Some of them unfair, some sensational. But one caught my eye. Security architect N. Harper resurfaces as guardian of EtherLink. They called me a rescuer, a saboteur, a renegade. Labels left by those who only saw pixels on a screen. I folded the paper into my pocket and pressed on. 2 blocks later, I reached the co-working loft where EtherLink had been born. The windows were dark now, but inside, I remembered the hum of servers in the corner. The sticky notes plastered on glass panes, half-empty coffee mugs scattered on communal tables. It felt different, smaller, but more real. I pressed my palm against the cool brick wall and let my mind drift back to those nights when the biggest fear wasn't corporate politics but midnight crashes and memory leaks. Back then, the dream was simple: build something solid that wouldn't fail. I continued on to the riverfront park where lampposts arched like sentinels over winding paths. Sprinklers misted the grass beneath benches, and in the distance, I could hear children laughing at a playground. I sat on a curved concrete ledge and drew in a deep breath. The city's pulse was steady now, no longer stuttering. Nodes had synced across continents, jobs resumed, clients re-engaged, markets steadied. The framework I'd crafted had done its job, paused the world long enough to insist on honesty. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Cornova Systems, onboarding next week. Looking forward to our work together. I smiled, fingertips brushing the edge of the obsidian drive case still in my pocket, though its override function was retired. The real key now was trust. I tapped a quick reply, "See you Monday." I watched as the city lights shimmered on the river's surface, each reflection a tiny promise. In the aftermath, I knew there would be criticisms, questions about whether a single individual should wield such power, whether protocols could be abused. I'd thought of that too, and in our open source initiative, we'd built community oversight, immutable audit trails, rotating stewards. Accountability wouldn't rest on one person again, but on a distributed web of guardians. That was the next chapter. A jogger passed by, headphones on, a nod of recognition as I remained engrossed in the rippling water. A couple strolled hand in hand, sharing whispered confidences. The hum of life carried on, oblivious to the behind-the-scenes battle that had unfolded just hours earlier. I stood and stretched, shadows long in the lamplight. My phone chimed against Slack ping from the independent developers meet tomorrow. Keynote updated to include post-mortem on EtherLink. I paused, a ripple of gratitude washing over me. I'd agreed to share the entire design story, flaws exposed, lessons learned, ethical guardrails, no secrets left behind. In that lecture hall, I would reveal the code, the logs, the clauses. Everyone who built with me, who tested alongside me, who questioned me at 2 a.m. over coffee, they'd all be credited. Their names would shine alongside mine. I pocketed the phone and rose. Across the park, the skyline glowed against an indigo canvas. I walked back toward the street, each step steady, assured. There would be long nights ahead, meetings, code reviews, documentation, teaching, but now it felt right. I wasn't a ghost in the machine. I was a guide through it. Later, at home, I set the obsidian drive on the desk, notches still worn smooth by years of use. I pressed a finger against its polished surface, reading the faint inscription, "Trust what they can't take." It no longer carried override codes. But it bore a different kind of power. A reminder that architecture is nothing without integrity. I turned off the lamp and let the room darken, body sinking into the quiet. Tomorrow would come with new challenges. Politics would shift again. Buzzwords would mutate. New coups would claim revolutions. But systems built on principles, on immutable clauses, on transparent governance would endure. And I would be there, not as a hidden architect, but as a steward of those principles, ready to defend the silent code that holds the world together. I closed my eyes, letting the stillness settle around me. No fanfare, no applause. Just the steady hum of servers in my memory. And the whispered promise that sometimes the most profound impact happens when you refuse to flip the switch until the world agrees to light the way responsibly.